any of your big accomplishments in life, if you'd have known how much work was involved before you started, it would have been really, really difficult in a lot of cases to make that move. And ignorance was bliss in this case because I thought it would take me about 4 months and $5,000. And both of those were laughably off.
Welcome back to Last Life Ever, everyone. And
back, like they've been hanging out here.
they have been hanging. They're sitting around waiting for
Every
our
single time it cracks me up. You never fail to welcome people back.
Well, I mean,
What if they're the
welcome,
first-time listener?
First-time listeners and repeat visitors. This is now the longest intro of all time. Jillian, we have an amazing guest today, and I want to welcome Daniel Lucas, who's a friend of mine from Chattanooga, and he's invented, I'm not even going to tell too much about what you've invented, Daniel, but here's what you've done. You've made it so that people can just snap their fingers and have a salad grow on their countertop. That's how I would describe it. Countertop salads with Daniel Lucas. So Daniel, how are you today?
I'm doing wonderful, Jeff. Hey, Jillian.
I want to know, why do I need to eat sprouts more? Why do people need to eat more sprouts?
I'm so glad you asked. I learned about sprouts reading a book called The Sprout Book by Doug Evans, and I was shocked at just how much nutrition. It's nature's powerhouse of nutrition, but people don't like to do it because it's a pain in the rear. And you don't see them at Whole Foods because they turn really quickly. And so by the time they ship them there, so the only time you really get access to fresh sprouts are usually at a farmer's market. You're going to pay an arm and a leg because they have to work to grow this thing. They have to throw a lot of it out. And I saw a huge opportunity during COVID because I was trying to grow my own sprouts in a traditional mason jar, which is what people have been using for years. And I ended up throwing out 2 batches in a row due to mold and mildew. And broccoli sprouts are by far the most expensive sprout, but they're also the most healthy thing you can possibly eat, ounce for ounce. Anti-cancer, the benefits are through the roof because of the glucoraphanin and the sulforaphane in those things. Dr. Rhonda Patrick has done several videos of how this is like the superfood. The problem is it's so hard to harvest them on your own, especially using traditional method. And so I went to an engineer, I went to a CAD designer. We spent 3 years. We went through over 12 prototypes to come up with this invention, the Sprout Spout. And what we ended up with was something that produces about 4 times more than a traditional mason jar. It makes enough salad, whether you're using broccoli sprouts, alfalfa sprouts, or our salad mix. You can get them all on our site. It doesn't matter which one you use. You'll make enough to have a large handful a day. If you have 2, you can pretty much make salads every day for lunch and not have to go to the store to buy your own salad mix.
So when you say salad mix, are you saying you don't have to get lettuce or anything? You just use the sprouts as your base?
Yeah, you can use the sprouts as the base because this is the size of it right here, and you can see it'll fill it all the way to here every 3 to 4 days. Well, if you have,
and for people who are listening instead of watching, it's about the size of our head, right? Like it's like a 2-quart pitcher.
It's the size of our head.
Yeah.
Well, he held it next to his head. Yeah. It was the size of his head.
Yeah. Yeah, so you'll get about somewhere between 8 and 10 cups of sprouts per every 3 to 4 days. So if you have one of those, you have enough for a large handful a day. If you have 2 of them, you can grow, say, snacking sprouts like mung bean sprouts, and then also just use a big handful for your salad.
I like this guy. I like you. I like the cut of your jib. You know why? Because you're not just telling people, hey, buy one of my product. You're saying, you got to buy 2 of them if you really want to be.
Yeah.
I mean, in fairness, he does have like 5 different sprout mixes on his site. So you really need 5 of them. So
I'll do myself
5 right now.
I was telling Jeff before we started, Jillian, I'll do myself a disservice here and tell you, I'm still using the prototype. It's working fine after like 2.5 years. So if you buy one, it's going to last you indefinitely.
And, the first time I was ever exposed to this was the prototype, probably about 2 years ago. Daniel had me over to his house, and Daniel's a fantastic cook, right? And he loves to use fresh ingredients, obviously, or he wouldn't be inventing the Sprout Spout. But he also makes amazing coffees, too, by the way. So we can talk about that if you want to. But, so he invites me over to his house, and he makes me the salad with sprouts on them. I normally don't get sprouts except for like at a Vietnamese restaurant, right? Where they
Yeah,
like throw them in like a
in your
pho
soup.
or something like.
Mhm.
And I've never thought of putting these on a salad, so I actually asked about it, and then he showed me the prototype at the time. And ever since then, I've been wanting to share this with the world. So I'm glad that you finally gotten to the point where you're able to launch
Hey, thanks,
because
Jeff.
it's been a huge project. And I know you've got a ton of time in it, but this isn't your full-time job. Like, I mean, you obviously were making money some other way during the last 2.5 years while you were
It
building this product.
it was not my full-time job. If it was, I would not have been able to create it, to be honest. It took a lot of investment, from my regular job, and it was a passion project that just like as Jillian, Jeff, as you know, any of your big accomplishments in life, if you'd have known how much work was involved before you started, it would have been really, really difficult in a lot of cases to make that move. And ignorance was bliss in this case because I thought it would take me about 4 months and $5,000. And both of those were laughably off, off
Oh no.
the, yeah.
How long did it take?
Because of manufacturing constraints and whatnot, COVID didn't help, but I would say it probably took about 3 years of going back and forth on prototypes, and then as
Oh
far as
wow.
money, it took much, 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 much more than
So
4 or
12
5
times
things.
as much time and maybe 12 times as much money from the sounds of it. Yeah.
Probably more than 12 times the amount of money,
Oh,
yeah.
so
Oh
you've got a
no.
big investment of capital out
Yeah.
there. But the final product looks amazing, and
Hey,
people can
thanks.
check that out on sproutspout.com. Um, and I'm excited to get my hands on it. I just ordered mine
Yeah,
today. So.
exciting.
That's awesome. So now look, it- you've said a lot of stuff like what health changes can people expect eating sprouts? Because
Yeah,
look, we all hear like you should eat kale or you have to
yeah,
eat a ton of protein. It's you hear different things from different people.
yeah.
So what is it that what is the actual benefit of eating sprouts? What happens to your body?
Well, they're just absolutely loaded in antioxidants and
Mm.
nutrients. In fact, 1 3-ounce serving of broccoli sprouts has 4 grams of fiber. It has 60% of your daily vitamin C. I mean, and we're talking
Wow.
about a tiny little handful of broccoli sprouts. So, and by the way, I'm not vegan or vegetarian. So on my salads, I usually throw either sardines or smoked salmon or some chicken
Yeah.
breast. It's not like I have to choose between the benefits of sprouts and the benefits of meat. I very much say, it can complement any diet. So it's very
Okay.
versatile. What you'll notice when you start taking them is you will be a lot more full early on if you have a sprout salad, say before your entree. This is something I think Europeans and, like, French people get right, is they sort of they don't ever sit down to a big meal, right? They portion control everything to where you're never actually starving, and I would encourage you, if you're, like, going out for pizza or burgers, have a sprout salad before you go with a little bit of dressing, and you will not want to basically you'll have that filter that says, "I'm full," long before you normally would.
Oh wow. Okay. All right, look at that. I'm gonna get so skinny on sprouts, Jeff. You're not gonna even recognize me. My skin's gonna glow.
Yeah.
I hope that's true for you, but I'm
There's
the
a
one
l
that
yeah.
ordered, not you, so you
Yeah,
won't be able to recognize.
that's good. I like that, Jeff.
All right, now I'm gonna have
Alright.
to order one because it's promised me that I'm gonna have beautiful skin from the antioxidants, and I'm gonna get skinny because I'm gonna instead of
Sure.
eating an entire pizza, I'll just eat a slice or two from my sprout.
Yeah.
'Cause it's my nature's Ozempic, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Jillian, I like that. Maybe that'll make the intro reel, and
And it-
But yeah,
yeah.
so I'm excited for you. So you just launched, right? Like this week, right? This is a
yes,
brand new.
just this week after 3 years and plus of, going back and
And
forth.
people can get the seeds from you as well, right? I mean, like, so
Yeah,
it's
we're
not like you just get a sprout spout and you're stuck and you don't know what to do, right?
pretty
So
much, yeah. You just go to this landing page, sproutspout.com, and it has a bundle offer right now that we're just trying to get the word out there. So if you buy the Sprout Spout and 3 bags of seed, it ships for free. You get a $10 discount off your order. And if you subscribe to the seeds where they're shipped at your convenience, you'll get 10% and free shipping on all your refills.
Wow,
Yeah. See,
this
there
is
you go.
great.
Sprout Spout.
Tell me about tell me more about mung beans. I know
Sure.
I've seen like fake, vegan eggs being made out of mung beans, but I don't know a lot about them. What is a mung bean?
A mung bean, it's green and it sprouts really fast. In fact, if you asked me what the easiest thing to sprout, it would be mung beans. And
Okay.
they're bright green. They have a shoot that comes out that lets you know they've sprouted. The beauty of mung beans, especially if you're on a keto diet, is when you sprout, actually removes a lot of the starch from the bean. So you end up
Oh.
having almost like a keto-friendly, type bean in that it really shines. For example, I make a breakfast wrap. So I have a high
Mhm.
fiber wrap, 2 eggs, some hummus, and I put a little paprika for seasoning, and I throw a handful of mung bean sprouts on there, and it adds that crunch you want with a wrap. It adds that, and you wanna talk about feeling full. I mean, hour or 2 later, you're still gonna be stuffed, and it's just protein and fiber is all it is.
God, you're a good salesperson.
I
I
believe in
might
it.
have to break my rules about buying new stuff. Right before we started, I was telling Daniel that I'm not going to buy it right now because I made a commitment not to buy anything new and bring it into my house. But I'm thinking
What
I'm
if
going to have to
you
break those rules.
what if you gift me some money and I buy it for you as a gift, Jillian, and have it sent to you?
Yeah,
That preserve your rule and that
yeah.
like a
I don't know.
workaround.
I'm literally looking on this website right now going, I
Yeah.
think I have to order all this stuff.
Jeff, for you, I need to enable Bitcoin and Ethereum as forms of, payment.
And it doesn't even count for buying because those aren't current. You're just trading, Jillian. You're trading one thing for another. But all right. So Daniel, I want to talk to you about a couple other things too, because
Sure.
this is like an extraordinary project. And I mean, obviously, the dedication it takes to put together a brand new business from complete
Yeah.
inception, super inspiring. And I'm super happy that you did it. But this isn't the only cool thing you've done in life because you've gone through some setbacks during the last 3 years, especially in the last few months,
Yeah,
right?
in the
That
last 2
you weren't
months, yeah.
expecting.
Nope.
Um, and and if you do that at a time when you're also trying to launch a new business where you're putting in a significant amount of capital, it sounds like, um, you know, how do you compartmentalize and keep going forward with this stuff? How do you afford to keep going? Because the setback you went through is you had a job change you weren't expecting. And
That is
well,
absolutely
I'm
correct.
using loose terms here, but like, why don't you tell us what happened and how you've responded to it?
Sure. I was, just recently, my job was eliminated. I didn't see it coming. It was not a performance type, thing. It was very sudden. And, honestly, even in the moment, I practice, and I'm using the word practice. I'm not an accomplished stoic, but I practice stoicism in terms of, when it's within my control, that's one thing. When it's outside of my control, that's another. And in this case, I felt like, okay, it happened. It was very quick. And I've never, since I was 15 years old, not had a day job. So you want to talk about a fish? I called you, Jeff, or we met shortly thereafter. I said, this is really strange. I have never, ever been without a day job. So the beauty of it is when you have partnerships and contacts like Jillian and Jeff, the thing to do is build those relationships when you don't need them and say, "How can I help you? How can I grow?" And fortunately for me, I started about 10 years ago in real estate, and it was never necessarily I wanna make all my money off real estate. It was, I enjoyed the process of making money grow and adding value to people's lives. Uh, so I was fortunate to have built a lot of that in place over the last 10 years. And it it's definitely when you got the sting that, oh yeah, this everything's changing, it helps a lot with having a portfolio of incomes, not just one thing.
It's interesting you say that because like I didn't really think about it that way, but like, um, I started buying real estate in 2011, investing in single family homes out in Michigan, and I was working here in Chattanooga. And the company that I worked for sold to a bigger company in 2016. So I'd been here, investing in real estate for 5 years. I'd been down in Chattanooga for 6 years at that point. And I was not my job wasn't completely eliminated, but I was going to be moved to a corporate legal department, and that is not something I ever wanted to do. And the real estate investments that I made allowed me to say, you know what, I'm just going to take a small severance and I'm going to see what happens. And I can always get another job later, but I'm not worried about paying my bills tomorrow, right? And that was a huge freedom. And as it turned out, I've never had to go back to a corporate job since then. And I think that's kind of your goal, right? Like
Uh,
you've
I
been
I made
out
the
of your corporate
decision.
job
Yeah,
for a
I'm
couple months now.
as soon as I got home that day, I made the decision. I said, I'm going to do a 1 year experiment of not applying for a day job and just focusing on building sort of a. I hate to use the word solopreneur because I don't even like the idea of working by myself. I like working with other people, but I am in the entrepreneur space. I have a portfolio of different incomes, everything from like owning a duplex to being in some of the syndication deals. Those provide income, and the the Sprout Spout was something, fortunately, that I had started investing in so long ago, and we were at that point where more or less everything was kind of paid off. And as I told the warehouse we're working with, I was like, it's time for this to become a two-way relationship. Money needs to come back into my checking account. And I tell you, nothing if you find yourself and if you listen to this podcast and you find yourself thinking, I don't, what Jeff and Jillian talk about, it's neat and whatnot. I know it's good information, but I'm just, I'll get to it someday. My advice is put your back against the wall. And that's where I always get my best wins, which means get to a point where if you're not making progress, it hurts you. And in this case, for the Sprout Spout, for example, the way that I did that was I would write these checks to the manufacturer or to the designer and say, I'm investing, and now I'm making it really hard for me to back out of this thing because I'm cutting these checks. And then I would agree, the factories are going to make you sign a minimum order quantity too. So you
Yeah.
have to order this many units if we agree to make it for you. So be strategic about who you partner with and say, look, I'm going to make a commitment that I can't back out. And I don't mean that necessarily to get a better deal. A lot of times it's just the motivation to know, instead of binging on Netflix on, Thursday and Friday night, you're going to go, I made a commitment that I'm going to get X, Y, and Z done. So I need to, work on that right now versus sort of,
That is such good advice. I think about this for us, and so like we have spent money on Last Life Ever, obviously, over the years, and we've never really done much with it. But we never really were fully committed. And about 3 or 4 months ago, we made a commitment to
hmm
really turn the business into a business and not just like an expensive hobby. And we've already seen huge changes just because we've started offering things that are useful. Like the mastermind is a good example of that. Our mastermind, once you start bringing people into a mastermind, you have to show up and do it. You can't
Yeah.
back out. Like I could not make an episode of the podcast and it wouldn't make any difference, right? No one would question me. Like if Jillian and I decide not to produce a podcast next week, probably no one notices, or if they do notice, they're not going to say anything to us. But if we don't, we're selling product. We're against the wall. We have to show up and provide what we've sold.
hmm
And it's the same concept. I think that's really good advice. Like just,
accountability is huge, man. Accountability is huge. There's a,
of course, that's the whole purpose of the mastermind too, right?
yeah,
It's accountability group.
that's right,
Like
man.
our mastermind, we meet weekly, and in accountability, small group accountability pods, and it's really, really been
Yeah.
love. So I mentioned this earlier, Daniel, but we have a guest coming up on the show. You don't know this, Jillian knows, who is an expert in the health benefits of coffee.
Yes.
This is what he's an expert in the health benefits of coffee.
Yes.
And I was thinking to myself, Daniel's coming on the show, and he made me a cup of coffee at his house that was at least in the top 10 cups of coffee I've had in my life. And I mean, I've had coffee all over the world. Some of the best coffee I've had in like Ethiopia and
Mhm.
Tanzania. They source coffee from Tanzania for Starbucks.
Your favorite coffee wasn't the cat shit coffee in Indonesia.
No, God, that was horrible coffee.
Yeah.
Jillian and I, when we were in Indonesia, Jillian and I got Lombok coffee, which is the
Yeah.
coffee where they
Luwak.
digest. Luwak.
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 Yeah.
Luwak coffee. And the Luwaks consume the coffee bean and they poop out, digested coffee
Yeah,
beans, which are
it's
then
supposed to
cleaned and
remove the bitterness from the
yeah.
beans. Yeah.
But I mean,
It does not.
it did not in our estimation. We were not, well, at least the ones we had weren't very good. They were kind of shitty, if you will.
Mhm.
Um,
I would make an estimate that the number one word you're going to hear from your coffee expert is the polyphenols in coffee, which is what is the major benefit. I know Jillian is interested in like what makes the perfect cup. I've been
Yeah,
roast.
and
I'm a
yeah.
bit of a coffee snob, and I'm going to tell you something that you probably didn't expect to hear, and that is, I didn't go to coffee shops generally for the last 5 or 6 years, at least because I like making my own coffee. I make really good coffee. Here's the shocker: when my job was eliminated, I started going to coffee shops at least 2 or 3 days a week just so I could get out of the house and work on my
mm,
laptop.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
actually it's bittersweet because I go to some of these coffee shops and I think, man, great ambiance, crappy cup of coffee. Terrible ambiance, terrible parking is one of them where I go, man, I have to park over here and I
so
have
what
to
you
go.
do is you bring your own coffee cup
Yeah,
and you just kind of refill your coffee you buy
yeah,
there with your own coffee.
yeah,
I want to hear it because I'll tell you why I want to hear this because it's my husband will just be like, "No, I'm not drinking this," and he would have, yeah, him and the luwak
Well,
coffee would have been
So
now
a different
before you
situation. But
answer this, Daniel, I want to say something. So I've spent some time at Jillian's house. I've been there, staying in the guest room, getting up in the morning, and you, Jillian, you have a good cup of coffee at your house. Like,
I do.
and you have a cup of coffee that you serve to people you like, and then you have one that you serve to everyone else. And I've had both, and there is a difference. I'm
well,
sorry to
Sometimes
give away your secrets.
that's
But
one of those
but
things
you're
where
using a prefab machine to make coffee, right? Like you have essentially a high-end coffee machine. You put coffee beans and it spits out coffee. That's not what Daniel. So Daniel, tell us about your process. How are you making coffee? Why is
sure.
your
Yeah.
coffee
Yeah,
so good?
sure. Well, the way I make coffee, I wouldn't recommend necessarily because I roast my own beans. So that's
I
another
mean,
thing
don't be
entirely.
making me. I'm buying a Sprout Spout and I'm going to be buying a coffee
Yeah.
roaster. I can't be doing both of these.
So you don't need to roast them, but I will tell you the most underestimated tool in your arsenal for good coffee. Do you care to guess what it is, Jeffrey, Jillian?
French
A
press,
French press.
No,
distilled water.
no,
One of those bag thingies like the filter.
no. Those carbon dioxide. No, it's going to be the quality of your grinder will determine more of the flavor than anything else.
No kidding.
Mhm.
Quality of the grinder.
Wow.
Yeah, if you
Okay.
if you follow some like James Hoffman, who's probably the biggest coffee authority on YouTube, he has said countless times, and I've known it for years. If you don't have a burr grinder, if you're using a blade-based grinder, the kind that just basically spin, and the
Yeah.
problem is when you have blades that hit a coffee bean, it's inconsistent as to the size of the bean after it's been ground. So you have fine powder and then big chunks. If you ever go through a blade grinder, pour it into your hand and look, you'll see inconsistencies. A burr
Right.
grinder is two metal blades, and these burrs spin to where it has to be a specific size to go through the burr. So what you
Uh-huh.
end up with, you're able to dial in your cup of coffee to where it's not too bitter, it's not too acidic, it's not too sweet, and you're able to dial that in to where you get the perfect cup of coffee. When you
Okay.
blend it, you're basically just kind of spinning a wheel as to how fine you should grind it. So fresh beans, I mean, if you get them from a local roaster, that's the best way to go as opposed to anything in the store. If they have a roasted by date on them, that's a sign you're getting really good beans. Um, Beans, when you open them, are only generally good for up to 2 weeks, and then they've basically gone flat and stale. Um, so I recommend you buy. So if you get like 12 ounces or whatever, use it up by the end of 2 weeks. Don't be the person who stores it and says, these are really good beans. I bought them last fall. They're going to be
You
stale.
can't do anything like put them in your freezer. None of
You,
that stuff. Nothing works.
I didn't say it doesn't work to put them in your freezer. It just doesn't work nearly as well as just getting fresh beans. If I make you a
Oh.
steak at Ruth's, if you go to Ruth's Chris and get a steak and you freeze it and then you thaw it in 6 months and eat it, you're not going to say this tastes like it did 6 months ago, but you'll go, it's
Right.
still a good steak.
Right.
That's
Right.
a fair
Interesting.
argument.
Okay.
So I have to ask a serious question. So I drink coffee every day, 3, maybe 4 cups every day. Usually before 1, 2 o'clock. I mean, I have a cup of coffee around here somewhere. I think I left it out on the table when I got in here to record. I love coffee, right? Um, but I almost always end up getting like instant pod coffee, right? Like
Yeah.
Keurig's or something like that,
Yeah.
because it's just so dang convenient. So
Yeah.
how do I make it so that I can make coffee the way you're describing? And I mean, I'm fine with brewing a whole pot or something, and like, because I
Yeah.
drink a pot of coffee a day essentially, right? But like, how do I make it so that I can get a good coffee but still have the convenience that I need in my life?
I'm going to throw a curveball at you and say the first thing you need to do is change your mindset.
Yes.
You're focusing on coffee as a routine instead of a ritual. And when you
Ah,
tie it to a ritual, you will enjoy the experience more, which is
mm,
why the Chinese
wow,
and the
that's actually
Japanese,
great advice.
the tea ceremonies are, we're not rushing this. We're making the tea in a way that we savor it and enjoy it. So for those, if you're in a super big hurry, I'm not a fan of K cups personally. In fact, if I had to pick, I would go for like an espresso over that. And then if you want a little bit of a scare factor, there's a lot of science coming out saying that putting boiling water in a plastic container into your cup
Also,
is a bad
terribly
combo.
bad for the environment, right? Like,
Yeah,
there's just
all
too
that
many.
aside, we know that. We know that. But as far as to what I would do, Jeff, I would say the most convenient thing is to either get a good hand grinder and just do a pour over cup on the spot, which or just basically set it up in a way where it's more of a process to where you're like, I had the scale. You need you weigh out your beans. Generally, your ratio of water to beans is 15 to 1. What does that mean? That means if you put 20 grams of coffee into your grinder, you're going to make 350 grams of coffee. And so when you
Mm,
pour the water over it, you're going to end up with 350 grams inside of your cup.
Okay,
So,
so 15 to 1, a
mhm.
good hand grinder, and make sure I buy beans that have uh, a roasted date, right? Roasted on date. And I use them when I open them within a week or two of opening the bag.
Yes, the only thing I'll add to that is to say you don't have to get a hand grinder. That's just if you're traveling a lot and you want to take it with you. Like I keep a hand grinder. I have a camper that I take to the beach and stuff, and I keep a hand grinder in there, so I don't have to take my big
Okay, so I
electric.
don't need a hand grinder. I can have an electric grinder. It's
Mhm.
just gotta.
It's got to be
What was
burr.
the differentiator? It was
Blade versus burr. A blade is
for.
quite literally, look at the bottom of your blender and you'll see those sharp blades. If you ever see the ones where people touch them on the top and they go, that's a blade.
Got
A
it.
a burr, you're gonna generally hear, I mean, almost like a low frequency grrr
All right. So I
instead
need
of
a
this high
burr
pitch.
grinder. It can be electric. It's fine.
Mhm.
I can get one for my place in Puerto Rico, one
Mhm.
for my place in Chattanooga, and one for my office.
The good news is you don't need a coffee machine. I mean, with just a Kalita pour over, you're talking about, $10, $15 for the stainless steel or ceramic pour over and then the filters. You don't need, and French press is fine too, but I definitely wouldn't try French press until you had the grinder dialed in because because that coffee sits in there. My number one peeve with people who use French press is they make French press and they set it down and they come back 20, 30 minutes later and pour more into their cup. And any coffee person will tell you you're basically making that coffee super sour by letting it sit in those grinds for 15, 20 minutes after it's ready. So if you're going to make French press, pour the whole thing into like a Yeti or stainless steel and get it out of there once the time is done so
Got
that
it.
you don't ruin the flavor of the coffee.
There you go, Jillian. We've answered your lifelong quest for the best cup of coffee. Um, Daniel, other than people jumping over to sproutspout.com, right, to buy your Sprout Spout, how else can they get a hold of you? Where can they follow you? That kind of stuff.
Sure. Instagram, I'm at DP Lucas. I'll post things about my training. I'll post things about recipes that are not salesy or anything like that. I love to help people live a healthy lifestyle. It is
All
our
right.
last
So it's
life ever.
at BP Lucas, and we'll put that in the show notes
Yeah.
as well
Yeah.
on Instagram. And by the way, I follow you and I love your content. So
Thanks, man.
I appreciate that. Jillian, do you have anything before we wrap up here?
I would just like to remind everybody to live the best version of their last life ever.